Welcome back, everybody, to another fantastic episode of I'm Gonna Talk and You're Gonna Listen. This is the Bunker Codes podcast episode, I don't know. And I've been doing a lot of thinking since yesterday's episode of the Boomer Part 1. And I've had a lot of time to think about it. Not really. I've only had a couple hours. I worked all day. But I probably didn't explain it very well, but there's going to be multiple parts to it. And it's because there's a lot to unpack. And I'm not going to be doing tons and tons of episodes on identity, but I want to start this episode by explaining why that episode had to happen and why it's relevant to me and why it may not be relevant to you, but why I still think it needs to be heard. And then I'm going to dive into the next part of it. It's going to be a 3 or 4-parter. So there's two things that you can do when you're directly attacked over and over and over again. When your identity or your culture is attacked over and over and over again. You can either sit and take it and ignore it, or you can try to address it. Or I guess some third option, if you, or whatever, try to be the best representation of your culture, your identity that you can be. The reason why I chose to make that podcast wasn't to offend anybody who listens to the channel that may or may not identify themselves as a boomer, which I truthfully don't know why you would do, because boomer as an identity is separate from people who are working towards still trying to fix this whole thing. I thought I made that clear, but if sometimes people who aren't used to me actually talking don't get it for a really long time, if they get it at all. So it takes some patience and some understanding to understand that I may not be talking about you. I may be talking about someone else that you don't understand, or that you do understand and just simply don't like that I'm talking about it. This episode is filmed in front of a live studio audience, and my co-star Ringo the Cat. I should have changed the name of this episode to the boomer codes instead of the bunker codes. That would have been pretty funny. Yesterday I think somebody in chat was trying to gaslight me, asking which generation I was a part of. That is a very popular gaslighting tactic. I thought I brought that up while I was recording, but then I couldn't remember. Every couple of weeks now. At first it was like every couple months, and then it started feeling like every couple weeks. The boomers were getting on the socials and accusing the Gen Xers of not doing anything. I thought I explained that in yesterday's episode, and that this was a response to that. Somehow, I guess that didn't come across, or I didn't explain it over and over and over and preface and repreface the topic over and over and over and over and over. And I guess that was a nuance that maybe some people may have missed, and I refuse to feel guilty because I feel like I did my due diligence explaining multiple times that yes, there were issues before the boomers. I tried to say the whole 1920s thing. Obviously, I think the first gun grab was in the 1920s with Tommy guns and stuff, and then Prohibition. So I'm not going to do like a pre-boomers episode, although I did touch on it yesterday. A lot of a lot of our problems as a society did stem from, I'll call them pre-boomers. I don't know what to call them. I don't know what the turn of the century generation was called, but those are the same idiots that allowed the alcohol prohibition and stuff. So it's like, give me a break. Like, the intent of this show was always to be a positive show. I worked really, really hard. I think I did like 6 episodes or something, maintained really good positivity until this topic, but I feel really worn down by either people intentionally trying to be divisive. Oh, I thought that said radioactive butthurt for a second, which also sounds like a really good like grunge band. Yeah, that meme that says get in there and make this about you. Like, that's one of my favorites. Like, if you're one of the people listening to me, I am not complaining about you. Do not feel attacked. If you're one of the people listening to me, you're one of the people that are doing something about this, and you're not who I'm talking about, because you're not sitting there in chat rooms and on social media attacking Gen Xers all day, which is directly who this is in response to. Radioactive Butthurt sounds like an awesome band name. So, again, I don't know how many, I shouldn't have to say that over and over again. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to feel bad about this. If you think this is about you and you're working your ass off to try to fix things, this is not about you. So don't make it about you. I don't want to lose any friends over this. So, back to what I was saying, like, the boomers on social media will not shut the fuck up. It's on Twitter and Gab relentlessly now, saying, why doesn't Gen X do anything about this? My point yesterday is, we're not doing anything about this. The same reason the boomers didn't do anything about this, and the same reason the pre-boomers didn't do anything about this. You know, it's funny, I was listening to another podcast today, and I think it was pre-recorded. I'm not saying they stole their shit from me. Obviously, they didn't. But they said it was like the 1920s all over again. And it's funny because that's what I was talking about on my podcast yesterday. I'm not saying they stole it from me, because I think it was pre-recorded. They technically probably said it before I did, and I just missed it because it was a clip. Or it could have been Luke Uncensored, and I don't know. Anyway, I listen to a lot of Luke Rudowski, so it could have been him too. And he, I don't know, really smart guy. I think he said it was like the 20s again, but I've heard other people say it's like the 60s again. So Millennials is going to be the next episode. So yesterday was the Boomer episode. Today's going to be sort of like a quasi kind of like Gen X episode. And then I think the next episode is going to be like a Gen Z and like Millennials episode put together. I have tons of notes put together about the millennial stuff, because for whatever reason, a lot of my friends / I don't know if I really have any friends. We'll just say acquaintances that I talk to a lot all seem to be millennials or Gen Zoomers. But I want to do the Gen X episode. The turn of the century, obviously I don't have any of them to talk to. Most of them are gone. They were a very, very hardy group of people. They lived through the last depression, the last real depression, not our more recent depression. They lived through the other depression of unknown origins. They canned lots of food. They grew things. And that's when things started to go downhill, right? Like, their land started to get taken away, so on and so forth. Everybody's really quick to blame the 3-letter agencies, but I think passing the buck and placing the blame on other people means you're not taking responsibility. And I don't know if anybody just thought things were going to get better, but they never give any land back. They never give any of your taxes back. I'm not sure if interest rates or inflation ever really go down at the same time. In fact, I think the better we do, I think inflation's just going to keep going up. Stop! You can get your toes. So I don't see this getting better. And rewind a little bit. I don't know how anybody ever saw this getting better. It wasn't declining as fast, though. And what you have is these odd periods of resets where there's the illusion that things are getting better, when in reality they just aren't as bad. So you have the Great Depression, the 2 World Wars, potentially a Cold War. In between that, you have Vietnam and Korea. And then you have First Gulf War, Second Gulf War. I brought a lot of this up yesterday. Some wars in Africa, some wars in South America, Cuba. There's a lot of little skirmishes that happened. And you have now, First, Second Gulf War, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, ISIS. A lot of BS has gone on, right? And I brought this up before, but maybe not in this podcast. The resets, the times of these like illusionary good times are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Sooner or later, they're not going to happen at all. And maybe you could have argued in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, those were really like tumultuous times, and they had real like illusions of this utopian society, right? Like the Jetsons or the science fairs that they used to have. The future was really bright for them, but they actually did nothing. They did nothing to get there. And instead you get what happened in the 60s in counterculture, and everything just went to shit, right? And I know there's arguments about when it happened and why, but people complain, oh, the corporations did this. And in fact, I've read a lot of stuff. Those aren't small mom and pop stores. Corporations are at fault, or the unions are at fault. Like, they want to blame everybody else. But nobody made you eat at McDonald's. Nobody held a gun to your head and made you shop at a Walmart. Right? You did that. Nobody held a gun to your head and forced you to get a credit card or buy a house or a vehicle on credit. Nobody made you go into debt. Okay? And you voted for all of the people that got us there. And you can go back in time and argue exactly when that happened. You could say, oh, Davy Crockett, this and that, such and such. There were people that wrote the Constitution, the amendments that weren't all on the same page. There was a lot of disagreements. Like, people say, well, you can point to when it started turning around. Like, no, it was always bad. However, the rate at how it got bad increased over time, and I think everybody just wanted to pass the buck. And that's why yesterday I was so hard on... You'll have to apologize to background noise. My roommate throws the ball against the door and the dog slams against the door, so something I have to live with. So ignore that. We'll make sacrifices now. So that's why I was hard on like boomer checks, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, disability, unemployment, food cards, because nobody factored in failure. And so I've heard a lot of arguments in the past that a lot of our societal decline revolved around when we decided to use our tax money to decide who was and wasn't going to fail. When the government three-letter agencies started choosing the winners and losers. People allowed that. People allowed their tax money. Again, way before I was born. I didn't do this. People, allowed these things. They allowed taxes to happen. They allowed the three-letter agencies to own large parts of the country, which they shouldn't be able to do, but they do. Of these stupid heritage and historic sites that are just thousands and thousands of acres for just no reason whatsoever. And even far left governors are completely throttled by their very own laws that their people in front of them put into place. They can't even fix their own cities now because of their own red tape that their own predecessors put into place. So the left is just as screwed as the right. It's a uniparty. And nobody did anything about it. And so here we are. And so we've covered boomers. Now let's talk about Gen X, which is the main topic for today. I find the most interesting thing about Gen X, first of all, and I brought this up a little bit yesterday, but it wasn't yesterday's main topic. There's a lot of disagreement on exactly who, what, and when a Gen Xer is. And I will tell you what one is, and I really don't give a flying shit what your opinion about one is. I will tell you what they are. It is any kid who grew up in the 80s or 90s. There's a little bit of a range there, and I will explain to you why. Because, like it or not, it revolves around video games. You've kind of got two different groups of Gen Xers. You have kind of the little bit of like the pre-Atari, like the first arcades into the Atari Gen Xers, okay? And then you've got your Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Gen Xers. Those are your two types. You've got your early 1980s Gen Xers, and then your late 1980s Gen Xers, okay? Anybody who says anything different or tries to throw all these fucking birthdays, it's stupid, like graduation, no. Yes, you should have graduated high school before the end of 1999. But keep in mind, even the song, Dear Class of 1999, wear sunscreen. The date on even that song alone, I believe, had not only been changed 3 times, but the whole gender direction of that song had even been changed. It was originally a gal that was supposed to be saying it to other gals, and for some reason it got gender swapped, which is really confusing, and I think it was to your class of 1997, and then it was 98 and then 99. Those are typically like the 3 years of when Gen Xers graduated high school. And I'm sorry if you graduated high school, unless you were held back, which a lot of my friends were, in which case you graduated the summer of 1999 or the fall of 1999, you are a Gen Xer. Anyone who says otherwise is a fucking moron, and I don't care, and I reject any claim that you make, and in which case you're probably a boomer. And I don't give a shit about your opinion of when Gen Xers were created. So why is that important? It is important because we lived in a very, very, very weird time. We existed before the internet, and back when there was like Trash 80s, Apple IIes, obviously Ataris, like I said, Commodore 64s, all the way up through IBM and all the IBM clones. Typewriters were still very much in use because nobody could afford a computer. Computers back then, even if you weren't adjusting for inflation, were more than what a cell phone costs now. Which is kind of funny because now you can get a computer for less than a cell phone. We still had calculators, and then we had graphing calculators, Game Boys, obviously, like Game Gears, Tiger, LCDs. We had, Game & Watches. Our technology was all over the place, but we still played with Transformers, G.I. Joes, so on and so forth. Lots of Saturday morning cartoons and breakfast cereal. We still played outside. We still did all those things. We still drank from the garden hose, blah, 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 skateboards and bicycles. All the things that boomers claim were theirs, and it's not. But here's the weird thing about Gen X, though. We still had, Nick at Night. So we still had all, the Mr. Ed, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, Green Acres, Mr. Ed. Hated the Brady Bunch, but it was a TV show that was on. Obviously, Adam West, Burt Ward, Batman. Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, I forgot if I already said that. We still had all of that culture. It existed and was readily available. Same thing with Looney Tunes. Before large portions of Looney Tunes got banned. Which is ridiculous, but whatever. Sorry, my roommate's being really loud. Pause it for a second. Leave a comment down below what your favorite retro TV show was. I Love Lucy was a good one. I really like that one. Meow wow. Meow wow. Meow wow. Yeah, I would say Twilight Zone and Outer Limits were very, 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 very formative. The old Star Trek, not so much. Obviously, Star Trek Next Generation. There were original Star Trek episodes I really liked. Like, obviously, the Gorn and the Tribbles and the Horta and the rock-eating, creature and stuff. A couple of other really great episodes. Anime was just kind of slowly starting to come in, like Voltron. So we had this, like, best of both worlds sort of a thing going on into the late 80s. The Veggie Vitamin episode. The I Love Lucy episode I always remember is when they were making wine and stepping in the grapes, and I always thought that was really, really funny. So, and then obviously there's like Mr. Ed episodes with like Clint Eastwood in it, which is just insane to me. There was even I believe it was a Mr. Ed episode. I think one of the gals in the chat was talking about, I think it was Mr. Ed Green Acres, where they were actually like going over how to like flip the breaker around to like turn on different things. And unfortunately there was only like one cut of it on YouTube that was like really, really bad, but like a lot of those videos were really ahead of their time. And so Gen X was like formed by a lot of that. We also learned how to type pretty quick because we were young enough still to where all the teachers were telling us that we were going to have to write in ink for the rest of our lives, because they thought we were going to grow up and write everything in ink, and so we couldn't write everything in pencils anymore, because as an adult, you weren't going to be caught dead writing with a pencil unless you were like an engineer. So all the kids had to learn how to write in ink and to write perfectly. And they also said we were going to all be writing in cursive. So penmanship and spelling were huge, because the boomers never believed that computers were going to be a thing. And that is part of a topic from yesterday again. College, after I stopped recording in chat, college came up. My family all went to Bible college. You want to talk about useless college degrees? Bible college. But what are you going to do with that? Be a pastor somewhere? So, kind of an oddity. And then I disagreed, and I said there are some trades where a college degree is in fact extremely useful. But then I remembered there's always exceptions. And I suppose maybe the point with a college degree now, and maybe this was the point he was trying to make, is that degrees have become the exception, not the rule. And when phrased that way, I would agree. Unless you're going to become a doctor or work in some kind of technical field, a degree is very, very unlikely to give you any semblance of value whatsoever. And so my parents were, both sides were against me getting a degree. My mom wanted me to become a plumber, and my father wanted me to become an electrician. Chat says some preachers be raking in the dough with the televangelists. What's funny is there were televangelists back then, and they were talking about the Temple of Solomon coming back and how the world was going to end and stuff. And I mean, they're not wrong. It's just interesting how long they've been talking about a lot of that stuff. But there was a lot of negative reaction when I think it turned out they were just really becoming rich. And yeah, I remember the first church I went to, the pastor was driving in a very expensive car. And the church was unspeakably massive, and there were multiple churches and a college. It was a massive campus. I mean, they had money. And so I guess when you look at it like that, there was a lot of money to be made at the time. But I think to the point of the other gentleman in my chat that was bringing up college is, and I think he agrees with me on this. I think this was part of his point. Excuse me, is that college has become a participation trophy. That's part of why it's become useless, and you have to get your master's now if you still want your education to be technically worth something. Your childhood church was a megachurch in a strip mall? Hell yeah. My childhood church was unspeakably massive, and it had its own, like, young levels of education, all the way up through college level Bible education. It had 2 mega huge preachy place thingies with the pews. It had its own store. In the back of the church, it had a second. Actually, I think the main church had 3 churches in it. Yeah, it's hard to wrap your mind around how huge this church was. Anyway, I think now each of the churches had like different ceremonial purposes. Is probably what that was. The pastor got caught spending a lot of money on gambling and hookers. Hell yeah. That's the way it goes. I can see that happening. So I can see the disenfranchisement with college degrees. That's understandable. But at the time, here's the thing though. It's easy for boomers to say college degrees are garbage, blah 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 blue. And my parents did that too. I think I was the first one in the family to get my degree. I'm definitely the first. I think maybe 1 or 2 others maybe finally got theirs 10 years later. I'm not sure. So, that's great. Whatever. But a couple things. I made a point to get one in a degree in a field that I was actually going into. And here's where I'm going with this. There was nothing but pushback and the lack of support for how much computers were going to fail. Computers were never going to be a thing. I was wasting my time. We're never going to use computers. There's no future in it. There's no money in it. Computers are stupid. They're a waste of time. Oh, you're playing that stupid Nintendo again. Go outside and play. Computers are nothing. You're never going to amount to anything. You need to get a real job. For my mom, that was a plumber, and for my dad, that was an electrician. And no support. And it wasn't until I was 24 years old to where the 3 letters decided I was truly independent, to where I could finally go get the funding that I needed to put myself through college. And on my 3rd college attempt, after wasting way too much money on garbage community colleges, I wasted way too much money, way too much time on community colleges. So finally got myself through a real college. as soon as I was 24, and never looked back. And besides, the various economy crashes, I think I've been doing okay. And I attribute a huge chunk of that to my degree. And I remember when the .com crash happened, we told you so, we told you so, computers aren't going to amount to anything, blah, blah, blah. And I remember going and telling them, I'm like, computers are going to bounce back. There's going to be jobs for me doing computer stuff. The bubble burst, but it's going to come back. Computers aren't going away. Yeah, they are. Computers are stupid. You wasted your time and your money. We told you so. Pretty standard boomer mentality, right? Even though nothing, there was no evidence that anything was going to get better, right? Like, did they think like John Kerry was going to come save them or whatever? Like, these are the kinds of things that like we were dealing with. So by then the world was already screwed. And here's kind of my segue into the next part of the discussion. So our predecessors were able to get houses and cars. They were able to raise families. There was unions, blah, 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 living, quote unquote, living wage, whatever. Women didn't have to work. They could if they wanted to, but they didn't have to, and everything was fine. Not talking about like multi-level marketing. I don't really know if gals really liked particularly working in diners. I'm sure they wanted to do other work, and in the 80s they put on their shoulder pads and decided to go corporate and stuff, and that's their choice. They should have never felt pressured to do that, but whatever. And all that's great, and here we are now. The point is, in the 80s, the 90s, you could have still got your education, and there was still the potential for you making enough money to actually get ahead. And this is kind of where I'm trying to take all this. There was still a potential for things to turn around, enough of us to amass enough resources to be able to sustain the lifestyles that we wanted, where we weren't going to be homeless or living in RVs or tents or under bridges, right? There was some of that. But most of us, if we hustled and if we applied ourselves, we could still do that. We could still theoretically work hard enough, bust our asses enough to make it work. And then in the early 2000s, I want to call that like capacity. In the early 2000s, after the .com bubble burst, there was still enough of that to where you could really, really bust your ass and make something work. The 2009 crash, you could still really bust your ass and make it work. That all stopped in the 2014-15 crash. You could no longer bust your ass and make it work. If you didn't have enough resources and education and experience built up by then, which Gen Xers did, but millennials and Gen Zers did not, and they didn't have the attitude anyway, but they didn't have the experience either. They may or may not have had the education, which was by then a participation trophy. They were not going to make it. And if they really, really really, really, really applied themselves, they maybe had a chance. Maybe. Up until about 5 years ago, 2018, I would say by about 2018, everybody that did not have education and an experience to back it up, the price of entry was going to be too high for them. And they got a lot of criticism. The millennial, I guess we're segueing right into Gen Zs and millennials, because I think it's important to understand. I was frustrated with millennials at first. Let me take a step back to the Gen Zers. Here's the weird thing about Gen Zers and millennials. A lot of Gen Xers had family that decided to have second sets of kids later on, right? So you could conceivably have siblings that could be like up to 10 or 15 years apart. So as a Gen Xer, you can very easily have a sibling that's a Gen Zer and another sibling that's a millennial. And I forgot what the next ones after millennials are called. I think they're just called They're Gonna Be Screwed. I don't know what their name is. Unless your family's rich, though, you're screwed. Unless a miracle happens, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, I have a sibling that's a Gen Zer, and I have another sibling that's a millennial. 2 Gen X siblings? Yeah. Exactly. And here's the thing. We can all kind of help each other. Well, theoretically. My half-sister is completely off the radar and imploded. And we're all just stupid, I guess. Which is a very typical, very, very millennial thing to do. We're all just stupid. It's like, okay, well, good luck. Knock yourself out. But like me and my brother, he's a very hard worker. And he has very, very driven ethics. And I think he was able to apply himself and work his ass off. And he had a goal. And it still wasn't too late. There were still some moves he could make. And there were still some opportunities that existed when he got started. Thankfully. Millennials, unless you have a bigger brother or a sister, you're probably out of luck, because the chances are wherever your boomer parents worked has already been closed down or bought out or moved to China or Mexico. The whole family thing doesn't get you hired anymore. And a friend of mine that I was talking to last night over the show brought this up. Unless you work for a 3-letter agency, the military-industrial complex, or the people the lobbyists somewhere with a government contract, you're not going to make enough money to get out of poverty. And you're not going to break through that barrier. And I was watching LTT, they were calling them moats, which was really interesting. And they were talking about how everybody that started their businesses a while back, they're building moats now. They're basically like reinforcing their assets in their plans. Everybody else can't get through that. Like, the cost of entry, the barrier is too high. Right? It has nothing to do with work ethic anymore. Like, the possibilities just aren't there. Sort of winning the lotto or being some kind of crypto genius. Starting a business now isn't impossible. You could be the next Minecraft or the next Microsoft or whatever. It's just highly unlikely, to the point of where so many people are going to fail even trying, that you would be insane unless you had a very, very, very well thought out plan and could do your cost benefit analysis and actually find enough people with the know-how to actually pull it off. Like, hard work most likely will not do it. You're probably not going to be starting a lawn care business. You know, you're certainly not going to be starting a car repair shop. Like, it's not there. Which is why it's often been described as being like wage slavery. Because medical care, gosh darn it, medical care, taxes, and insurance have managed to somehow suspiciously be, not to mention rent and food and fuel, car repairs have just the perfect balance to where you can never make money. So you can work like 2 or 3 jobs, but it's just not going to be enough. Inflation is outstripping the amount of money that you can make, and the interest rates are climbing up based on how much money everybody's making. You can pick up Forbes, any of them. What are the other ones? Wall Street Journal, Reuters. They're all reporting the same things. The Fed is raising interest rates based on how much money everybody's making. You will not be able to make enough money to get ahead unless you find somewhere to live that's basically rent free. Even when I was a kid, car insurance alone cost more than one paycheck. Now you're looking at rent costing multiple paychecks. So you end up in houses with like 4 or 5 people in them in like squalor level conditions. It's still very, very slimly possible. But if you're a gal, you're going to get taken advantage of, which is very scary. And if you're a guy, you're going to have a lot of problems. A lot of different problems. It's that, and that goes back to my boomer comments of they wanted to throw their kids out of their house. And then when the lockdowns happened, you know, they wanted grandkids and stuff. We want grandkids. And then when the lockdowns happened, people had to go to work. And their kids are at home because school shut down and daycare shut down. And not all, but what a lot of boomers did, they just told their kids to go fly a kite. And their grandkids sat there at home while the parents had to struggle and try to find babysitters or nannies. I knew some of my coworkers had to get nannies because their parents wouldn't help them. And so, and I want to point out, I'm digging into my notes here. A lot of it's in my head. I want to point out that a lot of these same parents are the ones that are like, well, I'm going to come back and, you know, live in your house when I'm 90 and shit in my pants, and you're going to be wiping my ass and bathing me. Right? Like, that's where their minds are at. And it's like, you know what? You get, you know, your thoughts of retirement you get to like default out of this shit show that you caused by just dying of old age and just leaving the rest of us with it. You want us to like amass these resources so you can come stay at our house. And all these like stupid memes of the boomers joking about wasting their life insurance policies and giving their life insurance policies to the cats or whatever, or donating it to just like spite their children. And it's this weird like toxic resentful culture, like. And the reason why this is personal to me is we've been in a culture war since 2015, 2014, 2015. We've been embroiled in a culture war with virtually no support. And every time we try to defend ourselves, every time we try to defend anybody else, a very, 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 very tiny subset of the population, a very, very quiet minority of the population, even said thank you, let alone hearing, oh, we don't like the violence. Oh, both sides are the problem. Meanwhile, like, the cities are getting burnt down. Where was their outcry? Like, where was... It was just... Man, oh man. So, they say nobody did anything. Well, we tried. And now there's a whole bunch of people in jail. And they're probably never going to see the light of day again. And the people that did this are still out there. And that's why we have to consolidate our resources and get out. Because this isn't a fight that we can win. And this isn't our fight anymore. And other people that realize the same thing, they are more than welcome to start caching things outside of the city and start staging things outside of the city, and realize that all the buses and trains, all the mass transit just exists to spread this abject lawlessness. And there isn't going to be boomers and Gen Xers and Gen Zers and millennials and whatever the after millennials is. It isn't going to be that anymore. It's going to be people living in the rural areas that prepared. And it's going to be people in the cities that are completely clueless and voted all this in with all their virtue signaling and dog whistles. And those are going to be the two groups. And when all this happens, I don't want to hear about you should have done something. You Gen Xers should have done something. No, because nobody would have supported us. And nobody did support us. We tried to fight the battle from 2016 to 2021. And nobody supported us. So, there you go. That's it. And now, we that were able to get jobs and build resources, people that were able to find little niches and stuff, we have to set up the strongholds for everybody the redoubts. Chat says rural should have a separate government entirely. We have completely different interests. Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. They tried that with like 2A sanctuaries, and cities should have their own mini governments. Chat says yes, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because I think that's what's going to happen. That's what I've been writing about in my books for a really long time. And I think that's what's going to happen. And there won't be like lefties and righties and this and that in the rural areas anymore. There is just going to be a rural culture, and there's going to be a city culture. And everybody is going to have to put their bullshit aside and the people in the country will have to be able to survive completely in parallel to whatever's going on in the city, which means they're going to need hardware, they're going to need training, they're going to need resources, which means they're going to need some people from the cities who have been amassing resources in the cities all along to have safe places in rural areas to start setting up. And the people in rural areas are going to have to get ready to take like-minded refugees. And that doesn't mean people coming in and looting the stores. Quite the opposite. I feel like I covered that in an earlier podcast. It means we're going to be taking resources into the rural areas and setting up shop. And it's going to have to happen. Because otherwise, what was the point? We're all going to have to be on the same team. And we're going to have to get on the same page, and we're going to have to find common ground. Which means no more stupid accusations. The people that show up, that planned and prepared and have resources and training and education and mindset, are going to have to form new teams. And this is what my books were all about. And we're going to have to support the 2 or 3 law enforcement officers there are and the teeny tiny court system and stuff that there is in that rural area, and make sure that everybody's held accountable and that we keep the town safe. And every town is going to have to do that. Every town's going to have to get squared away. There isn't going to be any more backbiting, social media, nitpicking about, you guys should have done something about this. It's like, no, you guys had a whole generation and you didn't do anything about it. So now you're going to have to live with it. Because I'll tell you, when everybody keeps saying that somebody should have done something about it, those are the people that should do something about it. And I'll tell you what, my parents had plenty of opportunities to move away, and they didn't do it. Well, my dad did, my mom didn't. But the problem is, like, my dad moved too far away, and he moved away from his, like, circle of resources. And I guess I'll leave the podcast with this. That's the biggest mistake people are going to make, is they're going to move too far away. And even though I already get dirty looks when I go into rural areas, even though they're just 20 miles away, if I go too far, I'm really going to be outside of my kind of circle of resources. And every time you have to rebuild your network, there's diminishing returns. And I would put that at about 200 miles. So if you're listening to this, keep that in mind, because there's so many people who go, I'm going to move to Montana, I'm going to move to Utah, I'm going to move to Idaho. I would look at a map, and if it's more than 200 miles, I wouldn't do it. Because you're going to have to it costs way too much to move, and most of the junk that people have to move is worthless. And every time you move, you lose resources. It's diminishing returns. And I had a friend and his mom, and through 2 or 3 sisters, and holy crap, I swear she was moving like every other year. And every time it felt like they lost something, even though they weren't moving very far. And I know she really struggled. The mom really struggled. And that's kind of an unfortunate byproduct. They didn't really have a full family to rely on. That's going to happen, right? You're going to have to trust people. You're going to have to build relationships now. You don't want to be building relationships after the shit hits the fan. So if you go camping somewhere, try to meet people in that area. Try to build relationships now. That way, when you're showing up and shit hits the fan, they'll remember you. And if you can, find people and start stashing and caching resources. Or maybe they like to reload, Bring them some reloading materials, and maybe you can reload with them. Listen to their stories, and maybe they need a new garden hose and they can't find a new garden hose where they're at. Maybe they can't find Quickcrete or, topsoil. Or maybe they just need help mowing the lawns when it gets hot out and they need to keep their grass down. Like, figure out things you can do to help in the area that you want to move to, and build those resources. And then you'll find the people who aren't sitting there on the internet accusing you of bullshit all day. And that's what I suggest. And if you're a Gen Zer or a millennial and you're feeling like there's no way out of this because you're too far behind, keep trying to find mentors that will try to help you navigate this, because there's still opportunities. There's just not very many left. After the big 2015, 2016 crash, a lot of, and then the 2020 shutdown, a lot of stuff just didn't recover. But I would say there's still options out there, just not very many. And you have to have really good work ethic, because I know they're giving so much money away now that a lot of people just don't want to work, and they've given up, and they don't see hard labor as being sustainable. So, and they see a lot of jobs going overseas, and they see a lot of jobs not being union, for better or worse. They see people making companies only to sell them out or turn into political grifts. Or they see people making YouTube channels only to get canceled or censored. Gee. So, don't give up. Just try to network. And So yeah, this I know I said I was going to talk about the Bunker Codes collector's edition. That'll be the next episode. This was really heavy on my heart. Because some of the tone yesterday wasn't exactly how I would have liked it to come across. So I know I've talked to a lot of millennials that are priced out of houses. Keep in mind, a lot of the Gen Xers got priced out of houses too. You might have to rent, or live with buddies, live with friendos, which I used to think was like the most horrible, scary thing on the planet. And in a lot of ways it is. But I think I want to end with this. As obnoxious it is to live with people who aren't 100% on the same page as you when it comes to etiquette, if you can at least all somewhat agree on security, I think you will find, especially as things get worse and worse and worse and worse, living with 2 or 3 or 4 people that you really, really, really trust. Radioactive butthurt. Living with 2, 3, 4 people that you really, really, really trust, you realize you feel way, way, way more safe than living with maybe only one person you trust, with an array of security cameras around you constantly watching all the perimeters of all the angles of your house. And I have a feeling, even when we live in a rural area, God willing, until we get a couple more people in the house with us, I have a feeling that instead of me sitting here staring at chat, I have a feeling that I'll be sitting here staring at an array of security monitors until I get a couple more people in the house. Because for 5 years now, I've been living with, at a minimum, of 3 other people, which affords you a lot of safety and security because you got a lot more eyes and ears out, and a lot more neighbors' eyes and ears out, because all the neighbors have 2 or 3 families living with them now. And if you can get everybody squared away, that is a lot of bodies to be watching. That's 2 or 3 times as many eyes watching the mailboxes, watching for porch pirates, watching for catalytic converter thieves. If you can get everybody squared away, yes, you don't have as much room, but there's ways to mitigate that. Yes, you've got to store more food and water, but you also have more people to help find food at the different stores because you've got 2 or 3 people grocery shopping multiple places. You can put lists together, send people to 3 different stores, and you've got 3 times as much of a chance of people to come back with something. And as things get more dangerous, you can double up on people going to the grocery store so everyone can watch someone's back instead of getting intercepted in the parking lot. If somebody's sick, you've got more people to take care of them. You've got more people that can run to the store to get medicine or run to different stores to find medicine and then report back. So the paradigm's going to be shifting. And even though I knew this 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I couldn't get anybody to buy in. And I think now, whereas my brother did, my brother really lucked out in that regard. And we did not, unfortunately. We tried to get roommates. But people here just did not get it. They would not help us. But I have a feeling now in the future, I think it'll be the only way. Everybody will be living with each other. Be it RVs, be it little temporary houses or shipping containers or whatever. So, what I would say to maybe not so much the Gen Zers, but definitely the millennials, you might not be able to own a house anymore. But if you can find somebody and be like, hey, can we long-term come up with some kind of agreement? You've got a spare bathroom. Do you have a spare bathroom and a spare shower? You know, like, find people, you know, that's another stand-up couple. That's the word I was trying to say, another stand-up couple. I'll be like, okay, you two are a couple and we're a couple, and we can have this bedroom and bathroom, and you can have that bedroom and bathroom. And let's all be chill. Let's all be chill, because this is going to be the new normal. And so I know that's frustrating, I know that's annoying, but I have a feeling now that anybody who isn't willing to accept a roommate, unless they're a couple steps ahead, like, the solution isn't to be looking for a new job or a raise, because you will not be able to keep up. The Fed will not allow you to keep up. Go look at Forbes. Go look at Wall Street Journal or Reuters or Associated Press. The Fed will not let you catch up. They have said that. They are saying that interest rates are not keeping up with people's raises. So you making more money, unless all your debts are paid off, and you don't need to buy anything on credit, which is going to be impossible unless you have enough for a car and roof and everything. You can maybe get a new job or whatever. You can maybe get a raise or whatever, but most places now, it won't be keeping up. So you have to be looking at very safely, very cautiously, vetting roommates that aren't going to stab you in the back. And that's the best advice that I have to give millennials and Gen Zers. Like, it's going to be power in numbers. Yes, you have to prep more, and there's ways to do that. And there's other YouTubers that have been nailing that on the head without a prep for more people. You can do it. You just have to plan for it. You have to be strategic. You have to have room. But, you know, your house is going to need multiple bedrooms and multiple bathrooms. And I think that's the direction that you need to go in. Or if you have kids, you need to be planning on not chasing your kids out of the house. You have to be not like, oh, I can't wait till my little shitter turns 18 so I can kick him to the curb because my obligation's over. Whatever the next generation is, I don't even know. Like I said, whatever is after the millennials. They're your kids, right? You need to be building the relationships with them and teaching them the work ethics, so you're not going to hate their guts by the time they're 18, so they can get a job. And legitimately understanding that they are now a roommate and they're a part of the team. Not that you're bleeding them dry of their paycheck, which is what my parents did. Yeah, chat says, I already told my kids they always have a home here. And I think that's going to be the biggest paradigm shift. And the last thing I think that the boomers really screwed up on. I certainly didn't feel welcome at all at either of my parents' houses. One of them was an authoritarian nightmare. The other one was just using me to take care of the house and the kids so they could just go gallivanting around and wasting tons of money and resources. So had a lot of good ideas, but a lot of really bad execution. So oh no. Chat says I'm about ready to pop my kid's balloon. He's been making noise with it for 3 hours. Hell yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds freaking awesome. So I would say start treating your kids like they are your allies. And imagine them staying with you forever and build a relationship of teamwork, which my dad tried to instill on us, but a lot of times that teamwork only went one direction, unfortunately. But he had the right idea, even if the execution was very poor. And me and my brother really carried that forward. And even though my brother was able to execute it way better than me, I still agree with it. And that's still the only way I see us getting through this, is by every house. If your house has 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, you're going to have 2 families. That's just the way it is. I think that's the only way that we're going to make it through this. And everybody's going to have gardens. Everybody's going to have chickens. And we're going to have a parallel economy in the rural areas, and we're going to have to guard everything we can. And then kids can start playing outside again, because we're all going to be armed to the teeth, and making sure nobody does anything bad. And the cities are going to implode. And that's what they want, because they'd rather sit there and bitch than actually fix their problems. And we're not going to fix our problems for them. So this is kind of part 2. I hope this clears things up a lot, and I hope I didn't lose any friends over part 1, because it's really hard. It is really hard not to rant when it feels like large portions of the internet are blaming you when you legitimately tried. When you went out there and put everything on the line on the streets. And then when the virus of unknown origins came, you helped everybody with religious exemptions, put everything on the line again. And then you have the whole NRA thing, who just completely cucked themselves. And they were in support of a lot of gun legislation early on, and then they flipped, but it was still a lot of FUDs. There's more gun bans coming any day. So if you don't like the hardware, you're going to have to just deal with it. Because the hardware we have, and defending ourselves, isn't always a very nice thing. And every community is going to do it a little bit different. And in Florida, if they want to toss, bring, if they have problems and the solutions to those problems involve alligators, and in the South and Midwest, if their problems involve feeding pigs, in Florida it involves feeding alligators, and in Louisiana it involves feeding the mosquitoes or whatever it is that, people are going to have to do what they're going to have to do. So it's time for everybody to get on the same page. And that means finding common ground. And stop bitching at each other for the methods and the means, because it is not going to be easy to get through this, but we'll get through it together. And start looking for who's going to be your friends now, because there's just as many people looking to see who they're going to take out first as soon as everything gets bad. And we have to get together and stop blaming each other, because there's plenty of blame and responsibility to go around. Chat says their bank just got frauded. Yeah. Guard your money, guard your resources, check your bank accounts, don't get scammed. Boomers, if you're listening to this, if you've got boomer friends and boomer family that aren't computer savvy, make sure they don't get scammed by stupid phone calls. That's probably the big one. Make sure nobody hacks their phones so they don't lose, so their phone bill doesn't get jacked up with buying a bunch of phones that they didn't buy. The swiper at the gas station. So there's a new scam going on at gas stations and at ATMs where they glue the thing shut, and they make you use the tap, and for some reason there's a glitch in the system that leaves the tap open if you don't cancel and close it out. And so what people have been doing is they glue the ATM closed, and then they distract the person, and then they go, oh yeah, you got to use the tap, and so the person uses the tap, and then they leave, and then the person just drains your bank account. That's one of the new scams going on. But there's still skimmers too. Guard your resources. Check your bank account often. We don't have a lot of resources left. And make sure you educate everybody on telemarketing scams, ATM scams. I think since I've lived here, my roommate's card's gotten skimmed twice. My boss at my old job, his card got skimmed twice while I was there. Like, one of them was a gas station, one of them was a restaurant. So I guess that's all I gotta say. There's a lot of folks that aren't tech savvy, and you're gonna have to help them, and they're gonna be cranky, and everyone just needs to be patient and stop blaming each other. What's done is done, and we need to find new reasons to get along and stop the blame game, because there's plenty of blame to go around. Everyone needs to take responsibility. Everyone who tried, good job. Everyone who didn't try, it's either time to get on board or just get out of the way, so the adults can do some adulting. And I hope everybody's got plans to get out, because what's coming is going to be bad, and it's probably going to happen really fast. The last thing, my wife checked 2 or 3 more stores today, and there's almost no cat food. Don't forget to store up on cat food. and it doesn't stick for a very, very long time. But if you leave it in its bag and make sure it doesn't get wet, it'll last a while. And I want to be clear. Nowhere in anything I'm saying am I advocating for violence. I'm saying we all need to get together and get out safely, and with the primary goal of being left alone. Chat says stock up on dog food too. Yes, stock up on dog food. However, for the time being, dog food is way more obtainable than cat food. So, definitely stock up on both. But keep an eye out for cat food. And even if you don't need the cat food, somebody else might. And it could be a good bartering tool, especially since cat food bags are much smaller and easier to haul around than dog food. Okay, that's all I'm going to leave you all with. So I hope I didn't lose any friends over my last boomercast. And I hope it makes more sense now. I was frustrated yesterday from being constantly accused of not doing anything, when that's just insane to me. So, want y'all take care, and I appreciate you all. I'll end this podcast now and probably think of a bunch of more really good things to say as soon as I'm done. So, we'll talk to you all later. Buy my books. And the next episode will be about the Bunker Codes hardbound collector's edition and the review for the wonderful nuclear war survival book by Southern Pepper One. Okay, talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.